Can someone shut that door back there? Who's close, please? Thanks. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to call to order the 12 o'clock Department Head Budget Presentation meeting of May 18th, 2026. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Core. Councilmember Arias. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Weir. Councilmember Smith.
I am here.
Councilmember Coman. Councilmember Bashir Tosh.
Here.
Thank you. In keeping with Council's resolution, the public statements portion is divided into two periods. There's a period for items listed on the meeting agenda and items not on the meeting agenda. Statements for items listed on this afternoon's agenda are given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total per agenda item. Statements regarding items not listed on the agenda are also given a 2-minute time limit, 20 minutes total. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give them to the clerk, who will give copies to the council. If you're here to make a public statement, please fill out a public speaker card and give your completed card to the city clerk. We ask that you mark whether you're here to speak on an item listed on this afternoon's agenda or on a matter not on the agenda. Speakers who do not identify a specific agenda item will be presumed speakers for the non-agenda portion. Those speakers will be called during the non-agenda portion of the meeting. Everyone in attendance is expected to adhere to the rules of decorum established by resolution of the city's council. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers regarding items not listed on the agenda?
Mayor Go, we have not received any speaker cards regarding items not listed on today's agenda. We have received a speaker card for agenda item public statements from Eric Orellana.
Thank you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and council members and staff. My name is Eric Orellana. I'm here with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I'm here to comment in response to the proposed budget. Right now, there's a discussion in terms of increasing sewer rates across the city. And as part of these discussions, Leadership Council has emphasized the importance of establishing a low-income rate assistance program. We're here to discuss and encourage the City Council and City staff to include the establishment of a low-income rate assistance program. All across this city, residents are stretched thin by rising costs across the board, and sewer, water, and other utilities continue to outpace inflation. And so to ensure equity and to ensure that residents who are here within this city are not left behind and are not continuously pressured by rising costs, we encourage you to establish a low-income rate assistance program. There was a discussion that I had with your staff that the establishment of this program would be, well, I heard one number when in discussion with them, I heard 1 million, but at the recent, not the last week's, but the hearing before that, there was a mention of a $5 million price tag of the establishment of low-income rate assistance, and just wanted to encourage you to invest those dollars. I know it is a sum of money, but in terms of the total budget for the city, $5 million is not going to make or break anything. And so I think that this investment would really address a lot of affordability concerns for those across the city, and primarily those who are on fixed budget, fixed income, and most low income. So again, encourage you to find the money, and I think PSVS is an eligible funding source for this program. And I just want to encourage you all to remember that this budget and this fund includes investments for infrastructure, and I see that as not a priority, or not a lot of funding from this measure has gone towards the infrastructure. So this would be one way to address it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Oriano. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speaker requests?
Mayor Go, we do not.
Thank you. And for the record, Councilmember Arias entered at 12:06. Next item, please.
Mayor, if I could ask a question.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a question for the speaker. One, thank you for coming and voicing your concern for our fixed income residents. You had requested a $5 million allocation. I was just curious to know if, how you had arrived on that $5 million number. Does that adequately provide enough to cover every single, low-income, fixed-income family household in the city of Bakersfield that would be impacted by the rates, or, what was the rationale behind that number?
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. That number was cited by your staff at a recent presentation. I think that would have given a couple $100 discount annually for residents across the city. So I don't know how many folks that would enroll or allow for, but I think maybe if you can't, that type of discount would certainly reach some folks. I think once you create that program, you would see interest, and you could reevaluate whether or not you need more funds in the future. So,
Gotcha. Christian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, Council Member, Mayor, and Council. I think that the numbers being referenced is a number that we reported as the City of Sacramento, as one other agency that has a similar program. There actually are not many public entities that have those programs. There are a fair number of private utility purveyors that have those type of programs. But in the public sector, the one example that we found was City of Sacramento. They take $5.5 million a year and put it towards this type of a program. We have not conducted deep analysis beyond that. I could give you just some quick rough numbers, though, is that with 106,000 customers, we believe there's probably in the range of, and again, this depends a little bit on where the city council could potentially make a policy choice of at what tiers do you offer assistance. If we adopted tiers somewhat similar to the City of Sacramento, that would be close to 1 in 4 of our customers, so about 25,000 potential customers could be eligible for some kind of assistance. And again, without really doing that detailed analysis, I do believe that for the city of Bakersfield, if we allocated, let's say, $500,000 out of the general fund, I don't think it's going to see a significant reduction on people's bills. It would probably be something more to that order of magnitude, like a $5 million allocation, which, again, respectfully, in a large budget may not seem like a big number, but that when we've been making our general fund reductions this year, we did a 5% reduction across all departments, and that resulted in about a $10 million in savings for personnel, and that was 73 position reductions, and so $5 million represents about half of that level of position reductions to come up with funds that we haven't identified as of yet in the current budget.
Got it. Thank you.
And Mr. Clegg, was the City of Sacramento's amount about like ours, which is less than $5 a week? Was it in response to an increase such as that, which is less than $5 a week for people in that first year?
Thank you, Mayor Goet. That's a good question. I don't have that answer, although I think we could go back and do some of that homework. And actually, one of our management fellows did do a fair amount of research on the specific program, but I don't know that we did as much on the origination of the program. I don't think that it was actually in response to a specific rate increase. It was just a policy directive of the council. But I think a fair consideration, Mayor, that we could go back and look at what was, sort of driving the interest in the program.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Reports item 3A, fiscal year 2026-27, department budget presentations, budget workshop number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Actually, the first portion of the presentations today, we're not starting with our departments, but we did ask the chair of the Public Safety Vital Services Tax Oversight Committee to come and provide a report to this body. There's actually within their enabling legislation an expectation that that staff provides a report each year to the Oversight Committee, and then it references being able to provide feedback to the City Council. But there was a request from the committee, and we feel like that it was warranted to provide an opportunity. As in years past, your council has received minutes from those meetings, as well as some additional documentation of the positions statements of the majority and minority committee members on voting topics. But to ensure that there's a connectivity between the recommendations of the committee and the council, we've asked this year for the chair to provide a brief summary of positions taken by the committee in this year's conversations, as well as just the general recommendations from the committee going forward. And so, Chair Nick Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg, and thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Nick Ortiz, and as Mr. Clegg said, I have the privilege of chairing the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure In. So I'm coming to you to give you a bit of an update about our work, and with a little bit of, I would hope, some constructive criticism, and my personal recommendations about some things that I think maybe the city could consider that would be helpful to the process, both to staff, to the council, and really to the community in terms of how they get accountability and transparency for these really important tax dollars. So with that, I have some prepared remarks. I will appreciate and express my apologies and ask for your forbearance. It's about, I've rehearsed it, it's about 10 minutes. I will send it to you all with some accompanying documentation, but wanted to speak it live first. So I want to start by saying something that I really rarely say because I don't really like aging myself, which is I was there at the beginning. So in 2017 and 2018, I had the privilege of helping to build the coalition, and then with some members of this council helping to lead the campaign to pass Measure In. And so I'll borrow from the movies, though you are all clearly very skilled candidate campaigners. Issue campaigns are a little different. They are like the movie Inception. You spend months trying to plant an idea in a voter's mind, and you never quite know which seed is going to take root and grow into a yes. On the committee, unfortunately, we spend a lot of time thinking and talking about what voters really intended. And the honest answer is that no one in this room can know for certain which idea grew in which voter's mind. What we do know is that 51% of them, by a margin of yes, that very slim 97 votes, trusted us enough to say yes. So we're now 7 budget cycles into Measure In. Enough time to know what's working, enough time to see what we didn't fully anticipate, and enough time to ask questions about whether the structures we built in 2019 still fit the moment we're in today. That's the spirit I want to bring to these remarks, not criticism for its own sake, but critical examination. So my goal today is to be useful to staff, useful to this council, and honest with all of you about what the committee is seeing. So first, I want to start with the positive, what's working. Measure In has changed the city. BPD is approaching full staffing for the first time in a generation. Homicides are down 57%. Shootings are down 60%. Park rangers, we now have a program for park rangers. We have rapid response teams. We've moved more than 400 people into permanent housing. We have a federal grant for MLK Junior Park that we would never have been competitive for in years past if we didn't have local match capacity, which we finally do now. The benefits of this measure are real, And in my view, the benefits far outweigh the debates on process or priorities that seem to dominate our conversation around this one specific revenue source. I've said this to staff, and I will say it to all of you. I think some of you have heard me say it. My preference is that this money is spent. My preference is that the citizens of Bakersfield feel the difference Measure N makes in their life every day. That was the promise. But the committee has a message for this council, one that we don't believe has been conveyed with enough urgency in years past. It's time to batten down the hatches because the storm or winter, or whatever metaphor you prefer to use, is coming. Look at the structure of this year's proposed PSVS budget. Nearly 3/4 of the spending is locked in because of ongoing costs. $12 million is transferred to the general fund, and it's the second time and our PSVS committee has unanimously voted against any transfers to the general fund that are not itemized. This year's personnel increases are being driven by salaries, but nearly 1/4 came from pension costs alone. I'm not here to tell you the general fund transfer was wrong. I'm not here to argue with you about the vagaries or the distinctions between a general sales tax and a specific sales tax. I'm here to tell you that good stewardship means knowing what to spend on, and sometimes, more importantly, knowing when to save. And when it comes to Measure N, I have to tell you that at least from the committee's perspective, that balance is woefully off. So 3 specific things, 2 on behalf of the committee, 1 that I don't want to say as behalf of the committee, but it's my recommendation. So first, fiscal stability. We should be contributing more dollars into the Section 115 trust and the rainy day fund. Fiscal stability was a central reason the business community got behind Measure N in 2018. The argument was that a properly stewarded sales tax could shore up the city's long-term financial position, allow it to invest in the quality of life, and create the structural conditions for growth. That argument is more urgent today than it was in 2018. $5 million a year against a $450 million unfunded pension liability is a start, but it is not a strategy. And consider what we have left on the table over these past 7 years. The S&P 500 has roughly doubled since the city began gaining revenue from Measure N. Every dollar we could have put in the trust at the beginning of this process would have worked so much for us. If we're willing to pull $12 million out of the general fund to balance your budget, then I think we should be really willing to put real dollars into the mechanism that is going to protect fiscal stability long term, not for me, not for you all. You'll all be gone from this council, but for my children, for your children, and for those who come after you. So 2, more direct infrastructure. I would like to see, and I believe the committee has expressed this as well in our votes, less PSVS spending on projects voters wouldn't have recognized as the kind of Measure N spending that we sold them. I'll give you a concrete example. Using PSVS as match for road diets and bike lanes is the kind of expenditure we should see less of. Parks are in the measure, police facilities, fire stations, direct infrastructure, reconfiguring traffic lanes is a debate worth having. And it's a defensible policy choice, but it's not what voters thought they were funding when they gave Measure N 51% of their support. And I respect that the council member who appointed me has made this one of his strongest priorities, but he knows where I stand, and you all do as well, and I think that he would want me to be clear with you and give you my honest read. And so finally, in terms of these recommendations, a structural change. So this committee operates differently than almost any other sales tax oversight committee in California. And I should know because it was my bright idea to make it so. Everywhere else, the committee confirms after the fact that money was spent consistent with what voters approved. There's an annual audit and a report. That's the model. Bakersfield is different by design. By ordinance, our committee vets proposals before they reach you and confirms compliance after. As the 2023 Kern County Grand Jury report documented, that creates real friction between what the public believes we can do, what we're legally empowered to do, and what happens when our advice isn't taken. I think the right answers to solving this tension are, and this is where I think my colleagues on the committee might depart with me a little bit, I think we should narrow PSVS oversight to where it belongs, post hoc, after the fact compliance, the way every other California city does it. I think this council should consider opening up real citizen engagement on the broader city budget through citizen appointees to either the council's budget committee or some other fiscal committee. The questions that matter most right now that I think you need citizen feedback on are not like how PSVS interacts with the general fund. It's like how we prepare for the storm. It's how does the city actually get itself ready and grow? These aren't PSVS compliance questions. We are not the right place for them. And they deserve a whole city forum. I know you feel that the council is where it's happening, but I don't think so. And I truly believe that you need a citizen voice at the table beyond the council. Let me tell you why. Look at what you currently have. You have appointed a committee that's made up of a former CEO of the Greater Bakersfield Chamber, who happens to be the public face of the only publicly traded company in Kern County. Regardless of how you may feel about this person, one of the Central Valley's most storied political consultants, a leading defense attorney, labor leaders, small business owners, nonprofit executives. These are people who run payroll, who sign the front of checks, and who have spent their careers making hard calls about money and strategy and priorities. They show up, they read the materials, they take time away from businesses and families because they believe in this city and they believed in this measure. And here is what gets conveyed to that group, meeting after meeting. Materials show up rushed, late enough so we can't genuinely prepare. We have no standing schedule. Meetings are called ad hoc, and until this year, only as special meetings. And the independent audits that the ordinance requires have been long overdue, with no explanation offered to the committee as to why. Each of those facts taken together could be a logistical problem on its own. But taken together, they convey something very clear to that body of people, of, I would say, pretty important citizen leaders. Every other body this council seats knows what it's supposed to do. The Planning Commission knows what they're supposed to do. The Keep Bakersfield Beautiful Committee knows what they're supposed to do. They have a calendar, they have a process, they have materials. The PSVS Committee, the only body in the city dedicated to overseeing over $100 million, does not consistently have direction from this council or structure from staff about what it's supposed to be doing. So, what that message sends to the committee, to the public watching, and I apologize for how this sounds because I really respect all of you, but is that staff doesn't respect our time and that your council condones that disrespect. So I'm not asking you to agree with everything the committee says. That's not possible, that's not the job. But I would like us to be taken slightly more seriously because the citizens of Bakersfield are watching and they deserve to have people who are respected looking over their tax dollars. So let me close with this. My goal, I would hope the majority of the committee's goal, is to preserve Measure N and to make sure that when we look back on this period, we can honestly say we did it right. The single most important thing this council can do right now for Measure N, for the budgets that come after it, for the next ballot measure, is to show the people of Bakersfield and the volunteers who serve them that you take them seriously. That's all. So with that, appreciate your time. I respect you all. I appreciate you listening to my lengthy remarks. Open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Questions? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ortiz, for your remarks. I'll admit I'm still digesting some of those remarks. So let me just start from the top.
Yeah.
So as you observed in other cities, and I've
Yeah.
taken a look at other communities as well who've had oversight committees on their special local sales tax, they are, as you pointed out, post hoc. So they're looking at how spending was made in that prior fiscal year. Describe to me what you observed in those committees, and does the tension still exist? Because at the end of it, it's still a oversight function.
It is, and I think I think really where a lot of the tension and a lot of probably, I don't want to describe it as dysfunction, because I hope that part of what we provide staff on the front end of the process is some citizen engagement that they might not otherwise get. But in general, in a sales tax environment, it is very perfunctory. Sales tax oversight committee will meet once a year. They will hear the audit, they will vote, may ask some questions, but it is not a multi-day budget process the way that we do it here in Bakersfield. It takes, to my point about preparation and materials, we are asking staff to prepare basically 2 budgets simultaneously. One for PSVS and one for you all that has to assume that we've acted. And that's just not sustainable.
So your latter comments describe a situation where valued members in our community feel undervalued based on the preparation of the meetings, the timelines. I'm trying to square your proposal with the description of the current situation. I don't want us to move in another direction and feel like there's even fewer responsibilities of that committee.
So what I'm trying to do is get to a place where we originally intended, which was when Measure N was passed. The thought was that there could be, and sorry, I won't even go there. There was a desire by some actors that this committee have more line of sight into the budget. And it has, the Measure N costs have become ongoing and have been harder to disentangle from the general budget. I think that that's created a lot more of this tension around, what are the priorities? What should it be used for?
Mm-hmm. And that's an area I actually wanted to explore with you a little bit more, because $12 million has been taken from PSVS to help fund the general fund, the traditional general fund. Had PSVS not passed, we would have been forced to make $12 million in cuts in the general fund budget. Has staff provided you some analysis as to what those cuts might be?
No.
Okay.
Nor could we really even have a conversation about, frankly, revenue shuffling. Because at a certain point, I became less concerned about anything more than optics. I think the optics of us writing a check to the general fund, not ideal to the voting public.
When you say revenue shuffling, is that your description of PSVS being used for
You
the general
would
fund?
find itemized costs that summed up to $12 million.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Mr. Clegg, would you care to describe your analysis on that $12 million expenditure to the general fund and what might have happened had PSVS not passed?
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember. And I will agree with Mr. Ortiz that we've never provided a detailed analysis of what precisely makes up the 12 million, because we haven't done that analysis, but we have shared in generalities the likelihood of what those impacts would look like, because as the general fund is made up of 70% is personnel for our staff, and huge portions of that are police, fire, public works, and parks. The general fund is made up of a few other core expenditures, but the lion's share of the expenditures of the general fund are personnel and those operating departments. And so a $12 million reduction to the general fund would look like significant reductions in all of those departments, even if we prioritized street level operations and prioritized public safety. There's no way to make a reduction in $12 million without impacting those four principal departments. And so that's been shared with your council. It's been shared in a very general sense with the committee, but we've never itemized what those cuts would be, because we haven't done that exercise with the council on as a prioritization process or as staff, but the assumption is it would be significant reductions to our general fund operations.
And if I just might, and I would just add, that is also an inappropriate conversation for the PSVS Oversight Committee to have. And I spend a lot of my time trying to keep us focused on what our actual role is, because that is a broader budget conversation. That is a question about prioritization that is best left to you and your council colleagues. That is not our role. And again, herein where lies part of the problem and part of the tension, where there needs to be a better definition. And I am sitting here, and I guess I'm trying to thread the needle a little bit politically to tell you, you all, and some of you were not on the council when this happened, but 2 of you are, and 2 of you happen to be in the room. You made promises to the business community about the level of oversight and about the types of spending that we would be seeing. And I am saying that the mechanism that we all thought was going to be, the vehicle for that was PSVS. It's now 7 cycles in, proven to be really unwieldy, and it does not seem to be meeting the moment. But I'm unwilling to say at this point that I think that the business community or citizens writ large should be walled off from having some type of voice in the city's fiscal affairs. I think that was part of the bargain that was struck when we put Measure In on the ballot, and those of us that supported it pushed it through.
Yeah, I would agree. As someone who was trying to negotiate between City Hall and the business community, running back and forth throughout downtown at different offices and City Hall, I remember clearly that was the negotiated agreement. And so I support, as was one council member, support your recommendations. I think that we ought to look at how we revise the scope, and would like to make a referral that we consider a revision to the ordinance that outlines the functions of the PSVS Oversight Committee. And I also want to just make a note regarding Section 115, because I'm very proud of Section 115. I advocated for that for a number of years, and I think that it's a wise move. I certainly support the idea of putting more money into that fund in order to protect us from growing pension obligations over the next 10 years, and would also make a referral that we look towards how do we find a more aggressive strategy to fund some of those, the Section 115 and also our general reserve, in order for us to meet, as Mr. Ortiz puts it, the storm ahead. Because I think it is prudent for us to do so. And then the last thing I'll say before I'll stop is that $100 million is a lot of money. It is a lot of money, no doubt. When I take a look at the need in our city, particularly in some of the most disadvantaged parts of our city, there's about $1 billion of need. And that may be an underestimate. That's probably an underestimate in terms of deferred infrastructure, in terms of, just basic things like there are neighborhoods that still don't have sidewalks, that have substandard lighting in neighborhoods. I mean, I can go on and on. As we continue to grow, the number of police officers and code enforcement officers and firefighters that we need to keep up, Measure N alone, it's not able to provide all things to all people. And so I think that's also something that we have to recognize, is that there's this growing tension from lots of folks who see this big pot. But we have to realize that there's a huge need out there throughout this city. And it's our job to sort of balance everything out along with city staff. So I want to thank you for your commitment, and I think the Oversight Committee is valuable. I certainly value their opinions and thoughts. And I think that we all need to continue to work together so that we can solve some of our challenges and keep Bakersfield moving forward. So thank you so much for being here today.
And if I could just say one thing, I would just agree with you completely. The need is so great. The reason that the chamber and that we worked so hard is because it was clear that our members and that the community has said the quality of life is slipping, and that this council and you and your colleagues at that moment acted and said, we won't let that happen. But we have to protect this funding source. It is so vital when we look at things like MLK Junior Park and the ability to leverage it. I think that that really is the conversation we need to be having as a community. How do we leverage these funds for greater things? And council member, that's what we're going to be counting on you for after next year. Thank you.
Councilmember Gonzalez, if I may, Mayor, just one clarification on your first referral, and we acknowledge both those referrals. You referenced the ordinance, and I would just suggest that it include ordinance and resolution, because the ordinance actually is fairly narrow, doesn't say a lot, and it's much more difficult to change an ordinance, and most of the scope of the committees actually sits in resolution. So if we could take a look at their resolution, I think that would pay bigger dividends.
Thank you so much. So ordinance and resolution. Thank you.
Madam City Attorney.
You just called me.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify as well. We can certainly take a look at what the language in the ordinance says, but it is a voter-approved measure. So any amendment of the ordinance would likely need to go back to the voters. But the resolution, I believe the city manager is correct. Most of the specifics for the group are set forth in resolution.
Got it. Okay. Then let me revise my... sorry, I've had very little sleep these last couple of weeks. To resolution. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Ortiz, would you come back up, please? First, I want to thank you for your commitment and work for the community in general and on PSVS. And I was there with you, and I agree, PSVS is working. And Bakersfield is a much, much better city today because of it than what it would have been. But I have to respond.
Absolutely. Hey, that's just like the debates that are going on.
Yeah.
I mean, when your name is invoked, you get an opportunity to respond.
So, public safety, we had 44 fatalities on the streets of Bakersfield last year. Mm-hmm. Violent deaths, tragic, unnecessary deaths, and road diets and work on the streets work towards saving those deaths. That's twice as many as homicides we had. We killed twice the amount of people on the streets of Bakersfield with cars than what we do through homicides. So my opinion stays, money well spent.
I will say this, and I think that this is the opinion of our committee. So just not to retort for the purposes of continuing a debate, but for the purposes of providing the perspective of the committee and the community's kind of feedback as we collectively provide it, which is none of us know how to use the majority of the large protected bike lanes. And so like explainers, like those types of things, our actual concern is very much a safety concern. That's what we've talked about on the dais, has been like, we do not know when is right or legal to exit or enter that lane, and it is causing confusion and could create more safety issues. I drive the streets of Bakersfield, the council member, so I take your point and see the violent accidents that happen regularly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others? Mr. Clegg, any closing comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just reflect also that as staff, we also have observed, just over time, the functionality and utility and the way that the process of reviewing items for the committee has just changed over time as largely just as a circumstance of the way that it was originally set up. Made a lot of sense in those early years to be looking at large, decisions and big items, but that as much of the resources have been deployed to police and fire and park rangers, that it just has changed the nature of some of those meetings. And so, so often it'll be at a 5-year mark, a 10-year mark, but at a 7-year mark is a reasonable time as well. I think especially because we have noted, I think collectively, as I believe even from other conversations with council members and committee members and staff, that it is a reasonable time to look at the scope and function of the committee and ask ourselves, is there something that's very productive that this committee can do? I will remind this council, and I hope for the benefit of any viewing public that are out there, that is that as a check and balance function, there's an inherent tension that is always there. And I've actually served as staff liaison to other tax oversight committees in other communities before, and looked at lots of other tax oversight groups before. And Mr. Ortiz is right that many of those typically are more so looking at the audited financials in a post budget adoption mode, not necessarily in a pre-budget adoption mode. But typically, when you have an entity that is tasked with ensuring that funding is not, going outside of certain boundaries, if funding does stay inside those boundaries, it feels fairly perfunctory because there's nothing going on that's outside of those boundaries. And so, unfortunately, I have still seen some tension, in other bodies that are saying, well, what are we here to do? If we're here to just say, yes, it was, then, that's not a very important job. But actually, I would argue it is a very important job, because if at some point it was outside the bounds, then someone raises their hand and says, wait, hold on a minute, this is a big deal. But so long as a legislative body stays within the bounds of the measures and rules set, it may feel a little more perfunctory, but it still carries an important role in creating that check and balance. Now, despite having said that little piece, I do think there are ways that you can have more productive utility of citizens oversight groups. And that's we can take the referral from Councilmember Gonzalez and take a look at some opportunities and say, how have things shifted since the original adoption of the measure, and find ways that are more meaningful to accomplish the underlying goals that were there originally as things have shifted over time here. So I do think it makes sense to take a hard look at it.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Mr. Ortiz, you mentioned that one of your recommendations would be more direct spending on infrastructure. Yes. I've been at a lot, in fact, most of the PSVS meetings, and then just going way back when PSVS was presented to the public, hearing the big focus was on public safety. I hear at the meetings, oftentimes from the committee, the emphasis on public safety. You're mentioning that there should be less spending on projects that the public didn't think that that would be funded through PSVS. And would you be able to elaborate more on behalf of your colleagues?
I would say this. I think that there is a belief that, and I don't always share it, but there is a belief that economic development spending, if not hyper-focused, could fall into that category. I think there is definitely a view that homelessness funding has, especially the CREEP and the growth of the kind of nonprofit complex that's relied on it, has become something that we need to grapple with in terms of how it's creating more and more PSVS dollars. I do think there is difference of opinions at times on things like even park spending. And again, there are people who are very adamant that parks were not really part of what they think public safety should be. I take a different tact on that personally, but there are those who do think that. One area where we do, because again, those of us in the private sector, and we spend a lot of time, and again, it becomes a point where staff has to do a lot of basic education that is just not their job around we spend a lot of time on construction cost. We spend a lot of time around labor costs and trying to explain prevailing wage and your contracting rules and how those are really not something that the city always totally controls is something the committee spends a significant amount of time on. Areas where they'd like to see more spending in when it comes to like safety and direct infrastructure, roads. I mean, roads and road quality is one of the areas that is always brought up every year.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Councilmember Gonzalez, do you have another request?
That's okay, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much. And I don't see any other requests to speak. Thank you very much for your input and bringing the voice of your colleagues back to us and updating us. Thank you. And now back to you, Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to have to steal this from Mr. Burns. I had mine right in front of me. We will now move into our department presentations. We'll have Human Resources first, then Technology Services, and then Public Works, and we'll see if by then where we're at.
Thank you. And I remember last time you spoke that this was going to be rather templated. Just a reminder that we don't really need everything read to us because it's right in front of us. Thank you for all the good work that you do, but yeah, we don't need to see have every word read to us. So whatever you think is most important that can help with the decision-making process would be greatly appreciated. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Gove, members of the City Council. Challenge accepted, I will do it. Although I am still digesting following up after Mr. Ortiz, passionate in his position, knowledgeable in his trade, and deeply committed to our community. I thank you. Thank you very much. So, but moving on. It feels like yesterday I was here presenting for the fiscal year that we're currently wrapping up. But then as we prepared and put the budget together, there are so many developments, activities, and accomplishments that we've had as a city organization that really go, wow, this year has moved quickly, but it's been effective and it's been results and results driven. So we're appreciative of that. Summary of our budget for this year. The theme that you heard 2 weeks ago from my colleagues in terms of looking at cost-saving initiatives, we are presenting a $3.2 million budget, which is a 0.92% decrease. And we'll walk through some of those changes. Overall, our personnel services represent the broadest base of our total department budget. We operate within the general fund and PSVS. We had one capital project for efficiencies of looking at an automated program that we brought online, helping with hiring processes in police and fire. That'll wrap up and won't be continued. But overall, our operations are supporting recruitment activities. So let's go ahead and take a look at what some of those activities and changes this year represent. So again, initiated a cost-saving measures, not only in our operating budget to see where we could make reductions in streamlined costs, but also we'll talk about personnel changes that come with our current initiative citywide. We had minimal changes. Roughly 72 to 75% of our budget is related directly to employment-related costs. HR is the centralized human resources function for all 12 departments and all city employees, and so we are the hub of operating and hiring or kicking off the hiring process, and so those costs fall within our budget. So some of them were changed, and we'll talk about with those cost-saving measures, we have a hiring freeze, so would we see more? Actually, we had roughly 90% of our hiring this past year was in what I'll call second-generation jobs, jobs that were filled and became vacant due to retirement, separations, or other personnel actions. And so we're cautious starting off this year with too many reductions in our operating budget because we do believe that we'll still have people that will leave for a variety of reasons. And having those resources available to be able to punt and have opportunities to backfill the staffing that will be approved with the budget is critical. Our primary increases were salary and benefits for the reasons that we've discussed, or you've heard from my peers. We had increases in salary and benefits in terms of the cost of living increases provided in general base salaries, and then our benefit programs, including our pension. When we transition over to what are the activities or highlights of the department, we have the recruitment activity. And so while we did enter a hiring freeze and put roughly 155 positions on hold last June, we did still have academies. So we've been focused on having 2 police academies every year, a fire academy. We also had a number of positions that were still in transition of recruitment and additional positions that were approved as we move past the first quarter of this fiscal year. So we hired roughly 65 full-time employees. We support the seasonal programs as well. Regulatory compliance, so we are the support for all departments in personnel-related matters. Regulatory, we support the police department with the stipulated judgment and have a section for recruitment and policy development. And then labor relations was a large part of our time this past year in terms of acquiring new extended MOUs. Thank you for your support in that process with SEIU, our largest represented group, police, just came on board, and then fire units as well. So we'll be in under contract during those timeframes. As we close our presentation today, we look at staffing levels, and so part of the overall cost-saving initiative is a recommendation in our budget to decrease our headcount by one, removing one vacant human resources analyst position. We had 3 positions frozen this year, and at this point, we have not made a decision. We'll have to look at future budgets as we roll out and the hiring activities and general activities of the departments. We will have a lot of time allocated to implementing our new ERP system and uncertain on how that will impact our personnel needs, but we are making the recommendation at this time to reduce by 1. I would point out that the Society for Human Resources Management, SHRM, is the leading authority nationally, internationally, recommends for an organization of our size of having a 1 to 1.5 ratio of employees to HR professionals. We've never quite hit that. We've talked. We have a lot of opportunities, but we've also continued to support in a meaningful way. And so this will continue to fall below those averages, but we will make it work. So that concludes the overall presentation from the Human Resources Department. And none of this is possible without having great peers in terms of the departments that we work with, and then a fabulous human resources staff. I give kudos to Deborah, our accountant, and Shayla, our HR manager, for their contributions in the budget this year. So with that, thank you very much. And if any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Tenter. Your department touches every department, so we appreciate that very much. I don't see any requests from colleagues, so thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Mr. Clegg?
Thank you, Mayor and
City
Council.
Manager?
Now, yeah, it is on to Technology Services, and our Assistant Director, Katie Reed, will be providing that presentation.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Katie Reed, Assistant Director of Technology Services. It is my pleasure to present to you our department budget for fiscal year 2027. Overall, Technology Services is seeing about a 1.5 increase in our overall budget. This is comprised of new requests for capital improvements, as well as a 3% increase in operations due to annual software maintenance costs and some internal fleet service increases. These are offset by a significant, just over 26% decrease in our capital expenditures. That's mostly due to to fewer refreshes in the next fiscal year, as well as not purchasing some equipment, drone equipment and things that we've purchased this fiscal year. So. So as I said, we are requesting 3 capital improvement projects totaling $997,100. These projects directly support our new regional public safety radio system currently under construction. I do want to note that while we are asking for full funding for these 3 projects, we do anticipate savings in the radio project itself to help offset some of these costs. Like all departments, we were asked to identify savings within our personnel costs. Technology Services over this last year has had 7 positions frozen due to various reasons, including some resignations, retirement, a couple of retirements, and in 2 cases, internal promotions of staff. Rather than eliminate just a portion of these positions and to meet the minimum required cuts, We chose to cut all 7 positions to realize those savings on the front end, and it provided us about an 8% savings in personnel costs. These 7 positions are spread throughout our business units internally, and they constitute an 11% reduction in the overall full complement, taking us from 63 to 56 full-time employees. Our department's success is heavily predicated on our ability to meet the demands of the departments that rely on our services. Even with the cuts to personnel, we have maintained an average time to ticket resolution of less than 24 hours week over week and less than 1 week month over month. The radio project has made progress over this last year, and it remains the top priority of our department. Other accomplishments not listed on this slide include assisting the police department as they spun up their real-time information center. Technology services staff worked closely with PD and their contractors to ensure network connections and provide access to cameras for key locations like the arena and Amtrak Center. We also worked with development services on their one-stop shop, and we continue to partner with them as they identify a line queuing software that will help some efficiencies in the waiting time. So technology services is an internal service department, and we are here to provide the departments the technology they need to meet your expectations, the expectations of this council, and the expectations of our citizens. But we are very much more than just technology, which is why I chose to end my presentation with a few of the faces that I have the privilege of working with and leading every day. So I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Colleagues? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation today. I want to just ask a broader question because I know we're speaking within the scope of this year's budget, but I wonder, as you take a look at the outside world and an external scan of all of this technology and the improvements and advancements with regard to software, and also as we take a look at some of our constraints within City Hall and some of the tension that comes up with regard to customer service. So I'm thinking about the permitting process, right? We continuously hear the challenges related to building permits, but even beyond that, special event permits or park reservations. What sort of technology is out there, and how do you think about or analyze opportunities for the city to pursue adopting a new platform or additional platforms that might allow us to enhance customer service and ultimately deliver better city services in a much more timely fashion to those residents of Bakersfield?
Thank you for the question. Mayor, Councilmember Gonzalez, I'm glad you asked that question. We are actually, it's kind of timely. We do not necessarily know the business of the departments. So we rely on their business knowledge and to partner with us so that we can identify software that may assist in their operations. We're actually, one of the things that I have started to work in my department is we're creating a director's initiative kind of subgroup where a group of our technologists who are in the weeds, in depth in the technology and understand it, are working with management to identify what technology we have in the city right now, what is being used, what might duplicate usage, so that we can bring departments with the ability to use the same software onto a single platform to help with cost and support, as well as starting to identify how can we get deeper into the departments to understand their business better, to be able to really identify how to find some of these efficiencies for them. Our goal is to partner with the departments who are going to their conferences. They're seeing the neat, shiny things that other cities are doing to help with the efficiencies. I myself, in June, plan to go to a conference where Agentic AI, which is an AI agent to helping to do just small little things, not anything that should have eyes on it, but just small little things to help build efficiencies within a daily workflow. So that's kind of where we're going with that. It's in process, but I mean, to be honest, we're a small group, so we have to, our first focus is supporting the departments.
That's great.
Efficiency is, or innovation is difficult to get to with such a small team.
That's great, and that's encouraging to hear you taking that step, and I appreciate that a lot. And I would just like to offer up, if I may, as we take a look at efficiencies, which I think is an important thing, I also want us to look at customer service and how do we enhance basically the customer experience. So it really is through the lens of those who come to City Hall asking for services, whether it be a building permit or whether it be a park reservation or special event or building permit, where we hear a lot of the problems. We need to look at it through the lens of our customers and as well as from our perspective internally of how to make our processes more efficient. Those are related, but it is a clear distinction.
That's fair, and that's one of the things that we're trying to teach our staff is, technologists tend to look at things internally. That's about the technology, right? But we we are a customer service department, and we do it within our microcosm of the group, but it's definitely, we definitely need to work, when we're working with the departments, we need to consider ourselves, if we were a citizen going through this process, how would it look for us? So I do thank you for those comments.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, as well, Mayor and Council. Just a few thoughts that I'm reflecting on, from that question and topic. Agree, Councilmember, that there are still, I think, several opportunities to work on both efficiencies and customer service, and we do rely heavily on the departments to be thinking about what is the business solution that may have a technology component, but what's the business solution that helps them to be more efficient or to have better customer service, and then work closely with technology services to find that technology piece that helps with ultimately that business solution. I think to reflect back just really quickly, your council knows this well, but like our adoption rate of technology maybe 10 years ago was well behind the current standards, and in the last 5 years we've had a very fast adoption rate to try and catch up. And I will say that there were some growing pains with that. We had some challenges to adopt so many big projects all at once. And when you think about having an ERP going on at the same time as we're doing our electronic permitting, as well as many other projects. We had more than 30 projects a few years ago. There's some good news is that we've worked through the biggest chunk of that sort of, we had a very big appetite because we were so far behind, and we had some one-time dollars that we could make some big investments. The big push to get through, that sort of project backlog that was created because we're playing so much catch up. We're now in a place where we're down, into single digits of the number of large projects that we're trying to manage, not up in the 30s. We've done a lot of catch up. We've instituted a better governance process where we're making decisions about, what technologies to bring on, but we still frankly have a fair amount of work to do. And we've tried to now set a pace that we can take on the number of projects each year that we have the capacity to manage well and manage the change management, and that since we did a fairly big catch up, we've still got a fair amount of areas that don't have solutions that probably could use solutions, or those solutions are antiquated, and so we still have a fair amount of work to do, but at least it's going to be at a pace that I think we can manage with some of these reductions in staffing, because ultimately, even if you have, let's say, a really good software, it has to be configured right to be the answer to that business need. And so I do think we're going to continue to see adoption of technologies that help us with business solutions, both for efficiencies and customer service. There are notable costs. Our spend rate on software is quadruple what it was, 5 years ago. But it also does see savings on the backside of other resources. We're conscious of that. We're balancing that. We're continuing to look for and pursue new projects, but we also want to do it now in that pace that stays manageable to make sure we're doing those projects well.
Anything else, Councilmember Gonzalez? Mr. Clegg, just following up, a few years ago, we had a consultant evaluate some risks here, and I remember that technology was at the very top of those risks. What have we addressed that they had recommended, and where do we still need growth?
Great question, Mayor, and I'll give my best shot at the 30,000-foot level, and then Katie or Greg could chime in as well. Big pieces of that were the governance process, so putting the governance process in place was an element of that. Actually documenting and writing down policies and procedures. We had some reasonable practices, but we hadn't necessarily documented all of those as ongoing standard operating procedures or policies. We've done a lot of that policy development. We actually had 2 follow-up studies by the same firm to identify more detail, because the risk assessment was fairly broad, but they came in and did a very specific audit, and that audit had a lengthy checklist of items for us to work through on creating policies and updating some of our standard operating procedures in the governance. But if Katie or Greg, if you want to add more to that, feel free. We have had 2 follow-up reviews done by Baker Tilly and formerly Moss Adams to dig into those details, and then we're working through their recommended checklists.
I'm going to hand it over to my director, because I was not in this position or as in-depth with the process as he was.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Mr. Parnevas?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. Yes, we've done a number of improvements, and we continue to work through the initial assessment as well as the follow-ups. Some of those improvements was the creation of a cybersecurity team that monitors city assets and so forth. I'm happy to say, we've built that team over the last few years. We do regular audits on an annual basis where we work with outside companies that test our security systems and identify deficiencies that we then work through to correct, either internally or with our software vendors. We've, as Mr. Clegg mentioned, we've developed some governance policies that we didn't originally have in place. We're doing some process improvements. Part of the recommendation was expansion of staff, as well as augmenting public-private partnerships, which we've done over the years. And so I would say out of that original assessment, which also included replacing the ERP that we're partnered with financial services with. We've done probably 90%, 94% of corrections to date. I don't have the exact percentage, of course, in front of me, but we're well within soon to be complete that initial assessment. And as I mentioned, we do annual assessments as well, ongoing, as part of just ensuring that we're keeping up with best practice, because in technology it changes so rapidly. So,
Thank you. So, of the balance, what would you recommend as the next most important target?
Without the report in front of me, just kind of going off of memory here, I think the most important project is finalizing those governance policies and expansion on them. We still need to develop a policy around AI use and getting all those finalized and in practice, and then of course the review of those policies on an annual basis. Beyond that, I think we've pretty much done most everything else, with probably the exception of lowering staff over the last year out of necessity. But again, we've worked with our teams, and we've done some reorganization to where the efficiency is still there for our day-to-day business. Just some other items might take a little longer. But, for everything else in that initial report, I think we've addressed that. And then when we complete the ERP transition in the coming years, that should be the finalized product of that initial assessment that was done 4 years
Thank you.
ago.
That AI use, that's a moving target and something
Yes.
that's right there.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a couple comments. You had mentioned the duplication and how you look at that, and I appreciate that because it seems like almost every agenda we have the software maintenance. You also mentioned the software maintenance cost, and as we continue to accumulate new softwares, I'm hoping that we get rid of the old ones instead of continuing to pay the maintenance on them and make sure that we're using what we have.
That is the intent where it's prudent to do so. Currently, we're still utilizing the existing ERP as we develop the new ERP, but at some point here in the not too distant future, the old ERP will be end of life and we'll remove it as a supportive service. So
And duplication even between departments and different departments.
we're looking at that now. That's that task force Katie mentioned in her presentation, where we're looking at the software used throughout the city and looking for where there might be duplicative efforts and whether or not a single platform could support the different departments. A lot of the software packages that are used may tailor to one department or another. They might both be, just for an example, they might be for maybe project management, but one's tailored to police services where maybe another park and recs. So we have to look at those carefully, work with the departments. It really, that's probably the core of our services. It's not simply just maintaining the systems once they're bought and enacted, but really working closely with the departments and their lines of business, identifying the technologies that's going to make their lines of business easier to work and provide them with the information they need, and then work through the departments and see if maybe we can consolidate some of that. So,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests. Thank you, Mr. Pronovus. Thank you, Ms. Reed. And before we move on to Public Works, which seems to be a nice big one, we're going to take a little 5-minute break, please. You always have a lot to share. Okay, now, where'd he go? Meyer.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Zach Meyer, Public Works Director for the City of Bakersfield. This is our fiscal year 26-27 Public Works Department budget proposal. Before I begin, I would like to recognize Vanessa Vargas sitting in the back. She did the heavy lifting putting this presentation together, and this is her first year from beginning to end doing the budget for the department, so I'm very appreciative of the work she put into this. So first, just a quick overview. I'll go through these really quick. These are pictures of some of our accomplishments. So for general services, the one-stop remodel at the Development Services Building, where we moved what's now land development from Public Works into Development Services for developers and site plan review. So I have a couple pictures of some of the demo work and the additional office spaces they created. Design engineering, of course, does a lot of CIP projects. This was one of our bigger projects last year, Ming Avenue rehab from Old River to Buena Vista. Our construction engineering team managed the improvements at Mesa Marin for phase 2. So this was a pretty large project, and we were finally made it to the finish line recently. Streets does a lot of improvements. This was at Oleander, where we updated the circles that were there previously and did some other traffic calming improvements. Fleet provides equipment for the entire city, but in this picture, just highlighting we're starting to do more EV purchases. So this is some of the EV equipment we've already procured and have on site at the corporation yard. Our traffic engineering is very heavily involved with traffic calming. So these are some examples of rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and some of these are at school sites. Our advanced project delivery team, one of the projects they administer are all of our lighting improvements or new lighting infrastructure. So we are starting to do more solar lighting, not having to work as much with utility. So, and these are cheaper, so we can do more lights and do it faster. Solid waste, we spent most of the year doing more planning at our sites, but we did procure some new equipment at our Mount Vernon composting facility. Most of the equipment there historically has been electric, but in the picture you see there's 2 pieces of yellow iron. So these are new EV loaders that we have now at the site. And of course, our Thomas Rose Improvement Program, still going in my opinion. This is some pictures of our 7th movement, which connects eastbound 58 to northbound 99 loop. Current construction estimated to be done in September, October, later this calendar year. So going into the budget, this slide captures the overall impacts to the department. Just very broadly, salaries and benefits increased due to COLA or some of the impacts, and operating increases due to internal fees for risk, TS, and fleet. So a couple things I'll highlight on the capital outlay. There is a delta of about $36 million. Some of the reasons for that are some sewer collection projects that are bigger than previous years are being programmed into the capital improvement program. Also, this current year, we didn't have any RSTP funded road projects because it was out of rotation. So this year we have a couple of those. And we also had developed a little bit more reserves on our SB1 funding. So we're programming more SB1 road projects. That's makes up the majority of that $36 million difference in the capital improvement program. Other items I'd like to highlight is the refuse service fund. That one did go up about $10 million. A lot of that is for 2 reasons. One, the rates go up for our private haulers per the CPI every year, which is about a 3% increase to their fees, as well as the equipment rates have gone up a lot in refuse because we're trying to increase the rates more internally in that department so we could make up the difference of what we're anticipating seeing in the price difference from EV to our current gas vehicles. So that's why that one went up so much. So these are our department's recommended capital improvement program projects that are general fund related. I won't touch base on all these, but just to highlight a few of the bigger one-offs is there's the first bullet and the third bullet on the left are elevator upgrades for City Hall North and for the arena. We also have some smaller one-offs for fire sprinklers, HVAC, related projects that aren't out of the norm. We do continue to see some of our ongoing projects for vandalizing streetlight repairs, ADA improvements, disadvantaged alleys and streets. We start to see those year over year now. And we also have one, for example, the Manor Street Bridge revegetation. That was a project we already completed, but we're required to do revegetation. So again, we could go back and I can answer any questions if council has any specific questions about these. So on this slide, we have some of the projects that are on the bubble that are still being reviewed and for council consideration. So there's a few projects here that are general fund and some that are PSVS. So the first one is a rectangular rapid flashing beacons. We already have some projects in design, so we know we can put some of these out to bid at the beginning of the fiscal year if this funding gets approved. $1.2 million for street improvements at Q Street and the SB Street area. This is an ongoing program in that area where we'll do curb, gutter, sidewalk in this area. $1 million of PSVS for streetlight improvements. So again, we'll start probably doing more solar lighting, increase street light in areas in Bakersfield that need more and improved lighting. $2 million request for PSVS for the Beach Park Bridge. This is to continue the design process to construct a bridge that will connect Beach Park to the other side of the river. $500,000 for continuing traffic calming improvements. We do have some projects already designed for speed humps that were requested by the public that went through our queue and have now been designed. So there's probably about $200,000 to $300,000 worth of speed humps that we could administer right away. And then $710,000 for pedestrian improvements on Panama Lane from Stein Road to Declaration Way. This is to put a sidewalk on the north side of Stein Road that will likely not see a developer put in due to a canal being right there in its place. So as I alluded to earlier, our programming quite a bit of road projects with RCP and SB1. So first one on the list is Callaway from Rosedale to Olive Drive. Then we have Ming Avenue from New Stein to Real Road. These next two bullets for 7th Standard and Alfred Harrell Highway, this will be used at our street division's discretion, doing road improvements on those major roadways. And then we have two RCP funded projects, Oak Street from California Avenue to 24th Street, and then Panama Lane from New Stein to State Route 99. So this is our slide showing an overview of the department and its current complements. We did see an overall decrease of 10 positions in the complement. We did decide to eliminate 12 positions that you could see under that personnel change. 6 of these positions were in the streets division. And then we have a few that were in our general services that do some of the facility improvements. Then we did eliminate an engineer 1 and an administrative analyst. For new positions, we are requesting 2 new positions. One's a solid waste compliance inspector. This is 100% has to do with SB 1383 and the compliance we now have to impose on the public to make sure they have their green carts or organics collection set up. And then a facility worker that we're anticipating that we're going to need at our MRF. We are updating that facility, and we know we'll need more full-time workers at that site as we improve the sorting line. There'll likely be a reduction in some of the temporary staff we have out there, so there would be some offset there. And then one of the positions we're repurposing is from a craft worker to a traffic signal technician. We are changing some of the funding distribution, so the gas tax will take a bigger hit versus the general fund, so there still would be some general fund savings, but there is a need in the department for more traffic signal technicians. And with that, I'll open up the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. You do a lot, and the work that we celebrated even last week with Public Works, it never ends. Yesterday, I received a constituent request, forwarded it on, and by 6:30, I had heard from Mr. Leonard. So thank you for all that you do with the big capital projects, but also the day-to-day needs of our residents. Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel like we're always talking about doing a litany of different, road projects. It's been some time, though, since this council, or at least I've seen an update on where we are on the conditions of our major roadways throughout the entire city. I know that we had received a report back from the consultant several years ago, but it seems to me like it would be a good opportunity for that to come back to see really where we are as it relates to the roads that are in terrible condition, the roads that are in okay position, and if we, made some investments there that we could potentially save and expand their lifeline or lifetime, and then those that are in good position, in good condition.
Yeah, I think, Councilmember, our pavement management system scoring and update, it has been some time since we've done that.
Great.
I'll just add to that, we recently did award a contract to update our pavement condition index, so I can go back to staff and see what the timeline is to complete that, and we can provide a report to council at that time, but it'll be this calendar year.
Fantastic. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just wondering on these RSTP and SB1 funded projects, you plan on doing all of those this year or what?
Yes, so staff has already, probably did some preliminary design right now, but the idea would be to have all these at least procured next fiscal year. So ideally, we'll probably start putting some out the bid in February.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Bashir Tosh.
Now, Mr. Smith asked my question, but I do have on slide 9, if you could pull slide 9 back up.
Is that right?
Is that 9? Why is mine?
Maybe you're on page 9.
Yeah, page 9. It's got the solar lights on it. The little, yeah. That third picture, can we add that street, whatever that is, to the list? I mean, that looks awful. I wonder how much money we spend on consultants that tell us what our eyes can tell us just by looking at that picture. I don't know whose ward that is, but I see a kid on a Razor scooter just falling and busting their face because I did that on streets like that. So that's my referral. Find wherever that picture is, add that to the list.
Good eye.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to point out that on slide 12, we have a number of CIP projects. And I don't want to get into the details of each project and how I feel about each one, but I do want to make the point of the capital outlay fund is primarily funded through TOT, correct?
That is correct, Councilmember.
Yeah, so our transit occupancy tax is funding the capital outlay fund. There perhaps is a percentage of general fund dollars that also provide support for the capital outlay fund.
Actually, thank you for the question, Councilmember Gonzalez. Yeah. Actually, the only funding source for the capital outlay fund is TOT dollars.
Is TOT.
There are no general fund dollars transferred to the capital outlay fund.
Okay, so as we look at slide 13, we see then PSVS introduced for some consideration of additional projects, further enhancing our ability to deliver services, which underscores Mr. Ortiz's earlier point, the need to address some of our road conditions. And so I want to just underscore this point in that, a lot of these dollars are while they all end up in the general fund, they're all working towards supporting road improvements or other improvements in our city. And it's very difficult for us to look at one funding source in isolation because we know that there are many different revenue streams that we're working and we're threading together in order to best deliver the needs of our community. I would love to see our TOT enhanced, and I'm looking forward to our I call it Airbnb, but our short-term rental ordinance that allows us to increase the TOT. And then finally, we have here $500,000 for citywide traffic calming improvements. I appreciate that because it feels like almost weekly now. I get a call from a constituent who's talking about their neighborhood streets where traffic is just going too fast. And they've made requests and there have been studies and, perhaps we send law enforcement out to, enforce speeds, but, those are always temporary solutions. And the reality is that our streets, our neighborhood streets, are increasingly more dangerous, and we hear it from constituents all over the place all the time. I mean, within the last month, there is, I think, at least 2 or 3 news reports of dangerous car accidents on our neighborhood streets. And so I just want to underscore a referral I'd made several months ago, maybe over a year ago, that we look at prioritizing our neighborhood streets around schools for traffic calming efforts. And we not wait for residents to complain about speeding traffic, that we develop a plan, a more proactive effort for us to begin with some traffic calming strategies that are unique to school zones so that we can help reduce the speed of traffic, because people just don't get the message. They just don't get it. I was driving by Franklin Elementary a few days ago, and someone literally, I was going 25 miles per hour, someone literally turned into the opposite lane and passed me by because I was driving 25 miles per hour. I mean, I could not believe it. But I don't know where people are going that causes them such a strong sense of urgency, but too many people are driving way too fast. And I think we just need to design our roads, particularly around schools, better so that we can help reduce that traffic speed. Thanks.
I don't see any other requests. Any further comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just note that we will discuss the general fund capital improvement projects at the end of this session. And so I think, yeah, we can move forward.
Thank you. Development Services Department. Development Services Department.
Waiting for the slideshow. All right. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, council members. Phil Burns, Development Services Director. It's my pleasure to present the 26-27 Development Services budget. And I do have several staff members here in the audience also. Just a quick year in review. One-stop shop has been a topic for Development Services. We have, for the first 6 months of the year, we had a really large remodel. Thank you, Zach Meyer and team, for completing that remodel and opening up the one-stop shop in January with both land development, building, planning, and code enforcement all at one counter. Again, this is try to create a team to ease the development process and become the most business-friendly city in California. Some of the other large accomplishments, so we did complete our housing element. We have completed our CCAP, and we have other large ongoing projects also with the general plan and HCP. Code enforcement stays extremely busy, both with their normal calls for service and also homeless. We've cleaned up almost 5,000 encampments, and we've picked up over 7,000 tons of debris in those encampments. Looking ahead, one-stop shop, again, is still the topic, and it's how do we get better, more efficient, how do we provide better customer service? Some of those ways is we have another add-on software called the Guide, and this will go onto the front end of the permitting software to exactly guide members of the public to the right type of permit, the right information needed to be more efficient. We've also had multiple demos on queuing software, a way of the public to schedule appointments easily to the right member of staff. We've also made changes in our ADU process, trying to merge both the planning process and the building process into one review instead of two reviews. Again, this is will add to the success of the one-stop shop. One of the large advantages I see to the one-stop shop is a communication between development services and public works. I would say it's the best I've ever seen it, really working collaboratively on ways to do things differently and better. So I, again, want to thank Zach Meyer and his team to be partners in that process. And even though members have moved over to development services, that communication is, I think, stronger than ever. And I think we are a department of merges. Last year we had a merge of subdivisions. Now this coming year we have the addition of community development. Again, more change to development services. And it's also new opportunities to review and reimagine various processes. And I'm excited to have Jenny Byers as the new Deputy Director of Development Services, and she will provide some updates on community development.
Thank you. So the Economic and Community Development Department, we had 5 units. In that, 1 unit is now going to be going up to City Manager's office for additional emphasis, and so we are going to have the Economic Development unit go there. But that did leave 4 units, and so I'd really like to thank Misty Eaton right now, because I spend about 95% of my time over at Development Services working to integrate there, but we've really kind of left Misty behind to take the lift of the rest of the units. We also reduced our supervisors from 4 to 2, and so I'd like to additionally thank Cecilia Griego and Nina Carter for taking on that role with that work. But this team right here, they're a group of hardworking individuals, and I'm really proud of them. And while it's bittersweet that we are not a department anymore, I am excited to be working directly with Development Services. I've already seen so much benefit from it, so we're looking forward to more collaboration and integration within this next year. One of the projects we have is the Transformative Climate Communities. This was a grant from the Strategic Growth Council, $22 million to do a lot of improvements in one of our core neighborhoods. They are going to be awarding us an additional $7 million to be doing the projects. And so this, between planning and application and agreement, we've been working towards this for the past 5 years, and probably longer than that, to be honest. Program includes 16 projects. There's a wide range of them, including the Bakersfield Senior Center, demo and housing project, which the demolition should be occurring soon, with construction to begin this summer. So we're going to see additional housing units for seniors in that neighborhood. It also has a lot of community outreach, workforce development, displacement avoidance, and some technical assistance for those groups. So pictured here, we did a drought-tolerant garden at Lowell Park, and then the Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day, which really is an opportunity to see what environment it is for our students to be walking to school, to be walking to Williams Elementary, how many neighborhoods we have without sidewalks. And so there was about 100 students participating in this walking school bus. Next. This is another project that we're very excited about. It's also now a requirement in our housing element, and that's the home repair and weatherization program. We partnered with Habitat for Humanity, Staples Energy, and CAPK. The city completed 53 projects with homeowners for certain improvements in weatherization, with those weatherization being the highest number of projects completed. EOAs is another program that Economic and Community Development has been doing. It was wildly successful there for a while. We had over 100 applications. The most visually impactful have been these facade improvements. So we have pictured here what it previously looked like on Chester and 18th with Vest, Jasmine and the new Taste Thai restaurant, as well as Jerry Pizzas. And so you see the smaller facade grants with relatively a small investment, painting and signs, having quite the impactful change to the neighborhood. Next. So affordable housing, we have been working really hard with our developers in the community. With the creation of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we actively pursued state and federal grants. There were 4 affordable housing projects delivered in fiscal year 25-26, with 234 new units going into housing individuals. Pictured here is Auburn Vista that had 60 units. 15 of them were set aside for farm labor housing. 1 in 6 residents in Kern County is employed through agriculture, and so we do see a great need for our farm labor housing. 16 units of senior housing was provided along 4th Street. 1 in 4 of our seniors rely solely on Social Security, and so it is a very difficult housing population. And so we do see some new housing going in for them, as well as Renaissance at Baker, creating 85 units. That included a resource center for their residents to train in workforce development, get things like their GED and also skill sets. For our homeless services, point in time count recently came out, and you'll be seeing a lot of information about it. Kern County overall had an increase of 3.2% in homelessness. But that doesn't really identify what is occurring here in the city of Bakersfield. The city of Bakersfield has an overall decrease of 3% to the, going too deep, but that's okay. We do have a lot of information coming out about where homelessness stands in our community.
Thank you, Jenny. Rolling to our complement and our changes this year in personnel. Obviously, with another merger, we have added 20 employees into the Development Services complement. But we've also reduced 7 positions, saving approximately $1 million in the salaries. And we also shifted about a little over $630,000 in funds that were previously PSVS over to complete grant funding. So there's some shifts also. And then the positions specifically, we had a community development supervisor, a homeless services supervisor, an ECD specialist, a ECD admin position, a code enforcement supervisor, and 2 code enforcement officers were the reductions in staffing. With that, looking at our budget overall, this is a bit complicated since we had a merge last year and another merge this year. So it does appear that our funds continue to go up, but the reality is, yes, we did meet our 5% reductions. It brings our development services budget from last year from the $22.9 million up to a $40.1 million. And again, this includes our cuts consistent with the budget instructions. With that, staff's here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez, is that from the prior?
Mayor.
Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Question with the merger. If we were to make additional allocations as we've done in the years past to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, would we expect those to be listed here, or would those fall under optional investments into the trust fund through our CIP list?
We're treating that as a capital outlay item like a CIP item.
Okay.
And so it is listed in one of the optional items for council to consider. Just as a quick reminder, we did $500,000 last year, which was a significant reduction from years past. Had been as high as $5 million, and we've ratcheted it down just due to some of the fiscal constraints, as well as the reality that we've been able to actually acquire other funding sources and get a lot of, units into the pipeline, and also shift dollars over to the Community Land Trust. But all that said, last year was only $500,000. Currently in the proposed budget, it is not funded. It is one of the optional items for council to determine whether or not to put another $500,000 or some other number into the budget.
Gotcha.
And we'll cover that in the last presentation of today.
Great, thank you. And then question on the economic, the EOA program. I know Councilmember Gonzalez and I have provided some feedback and guidance in committee, but just want to ask kind of where, for the benefit of the public, where are we with the EOA program? Are we, fully on a pause? Are we taking it kind of district by district? What is the status of the program?
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. So I'll try and break it into where are we at fiscally as well as where are we at operationally with EOAs. So fiscally with EOAs, we actually had been contributing $700,000 a year into EOAs since the passage of Public Safety Vital Services tax. In the early years, that was specifically $100,000 into each of the 7 EOAs. In the last couple of years, we've taken a little bit of a different approach where we've built up balances in some of those EOAs and haven't necessarily continued to put dollars into each one of those EOAs, but had a larger, pot of funds that was available to replenish EOAs that had been fully expended. This last year, we actually only allocated $400,000 into the EOA program because of fiscal constraints, but also because we saw some of those balances. And this coming year, because of some of the fiscal constraints and the requests to reevaluate the program, we have not spent those $400,000 in the EOAs this current year. So the recommendation of staff is to not allocate new funds in next year's budget because we haven't really expended this year's budget. So there are funds available as we come back to the council with some sort of reimagining of the EOA program. So in the meantime, on an operational standpoint, we have identified, through the first half of the fiscal year, we identified to potential applicants that, it was essentially a closed program. We weren't taking new applications. As we kind of got through mid-year and looked at our budgets, we have identified in those EOA areas that do have balances that we have started taking some of those applications. But again, those that had fully expended their balances, we're not still taking new applications. If I got any of that wrong, Ms. Byers, please. Okay, I got it. Phew.
And is that just the downtown EOA that is currently not taking applications, or?
Downtown and Old Town Kern are the 2 that are fully expended.
Both of them are fully expended. Okay, thank you so much. And just one broad comment. I know change is not easy, so hats off to you, Ms. Byers, and Phil, to your entire team for reimagining what can happen on 17th Street and rolling with the punches. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
If I just may really quickly, Mayor, since
Sure.
I noted there were other comments. I too, now we envisioned how this transition could benefit both economic development and benefit community development services together. But I also have seen an immediate amount of energy going towards the priority goals of the council by rethinking how we deploy our staff. So it's already turning into a win.
Thank you, Mr. Burns, Ms. Byers. And now we're on to water. Mr. Maldonado.
Yes, Mayor, Go and Council, on behalf of Director Budak, both Mr. Maldonado and Mr. Oldham will be providing portions of this presentation.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Daniel Maldonado, Assistant Water Director over Water Resources. We also have a number of Water Department staff in attendance here, especially I want to give a shout out to Don Spangler, who took the lead on working on this PowerPoint presentation for us to go over. We are pleased to present the Water Department's proposed budget for fiscal year 26-27. And our goal as we go through these slides is to account for all budgetary elements associated with the River and Agricultural Fund, Municipal Water Fund, and the Sewer Enterprise Fund. And so we'll begin with the Water Department overview of the proposed 26-27 budget. This is a roll-up of all the funds that I mentioned and will be discussed more in detail in the following slides. Total expenditures for the Water Department are about $155 million, which is an overall increase of 14% from last year. One thing to note, the total expenditures also include other department expenditures, which includes operation, personnel, and capital project funding for public works, as discussed by Mr. Meyer previously. The total funding sources of the department are listed at the bottom. The total funding is shown as $155 million, which is a 14% increase from last year. This is related to that municipal fund increase that was observed last year in 2025, and also the anticipated sewer rate increase going forward this month. So a brief overview of the Water Resources Division goal. We manage the city's water supplies and water rights for current and future residents, regulate Kern River water, oversee the Kern River Levee District for flood control, maintain stormwater basins, implement the groundwater sustainability plan of the KRGSA, while also providing high-quality drinking water to the residents within our domestic service area. The total expenditures for the domestic operations is shown on the top half of the slide. We are proposing a 3.42% increase of the overall domestic budget, and this is due primarily to the salaries and benefits, as discussed previously, and also internal rates. In addition, we do have some new state water regulations that are going into effect related to water conservation and water quality that we're having to adhere to, and so it requires immediate investment to comply with those regulations. We're also, for domestic, we have a 3.42% increase for the revenues, which $6 million coming from the fund balance to meet that delta between the expenditures and our revenues. And this is aligned with the rate study that was approved last year. In order to lessen the impact on our residents, we started with a lower rate, and gradually we're going to meet that, bridge that gap that we're experiencing in that domestic fund. For the River and Ag, there's about a 5.13% increase, which is mostly due to salaries and benefits, and also other outside services related to updating stormwater management plans to meet our new NEPIDIS permit that we're anticipating to receive this summer. Our revenues are shown at the bottom. For River and Ag, we are showing about $9.5 million, which is a decrease of 5%, with that delta being $1 million that's anticipated to come from the River and Ag's fund balance. One thing to highlight on the River and Ag, these revenues that we are discussing were calculated in February prior to knowing the true water supply available to the city of Bakersfield. And so they're fairly conservative. If you look at the actual cost from 24-25, it shows about $12 million. So we're anticipating to come in a little bit higher than that, where we wouldn't need to require to use that fund balance for the River and Ag division. Lastly, I want to highlight some water resources accomplishments. Of course, a big accomplishment every year is managing the Kern River flows during the calendar year, diverting over 500,000 acre feet for various uses and users, including city-owned properties and facilities like Trucks and Lakes and Park at Riverwalk. The department also completed 2 reconstruction projects at the Kern River Canal backup weir, which is shown on the top right, and the Pioneer Canal headgate, shown on the bottom left. As you previously know, we received $1.3 million of grant funding for that Kern River Canal backup project, so we always like to highlight that achievement. We also completed the PFAS removal project at CBK 25, which is the first for the city of Bakersfield, and also the Stockdale Storage Tank project. Both enhanced drinking water supplies for their respective surrounding communities. All of these accomplishments align with the council priorities for maintaining reliable infrastructure for city residents to protect public health and safety, including being prepared for high precipitation and runoff events. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Yvette Roldan to discuss the wastewater sewer fund.
Thank you, Mr. Maldonado.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Moving on to the wastewater division. The goal of the division is to operate and maintain the wastewater treatment facilities for the city of Bakersfield. We have, in very small print, provided sort of a major breakdown. So as you know, the sewer enterprise funds Plant 2, Plant 3 operations, but as well as monies going into other departments. We have split that out under Plant 3 other departments. I won't touch on the specifics given that other department heads have already, but it is there for your reference. Plan 2, Plan 3, we are seeing an increase in the personnel services costs. A lot of it has to do with the COLAs previously adopted by this council, but we are also requesting additional staff, mainly to operators at Plan 2 and 3 at Plan 3. We'll go into more detail on that, but that is one of the main drivers of the increase for the personnel services, in addition to everything that's impacting other departments. For our operations, we have a slight increase on both Plan 2 and Plan 3. The majority of these increases are being driven by utility cost increases, as well as chemical costs for the two treatment plants. Equipment, parts, and repair and maintenance, we are accounting for additional funding for repair and maintenance. Just it does cost more to replace any given piece of equipment nowadays, as well as just a focused effort on repairing and maintaining the aging infrastructure. Capital projects, we have a decrease overall within Plan 2 and Plan 3 for the expenditures that we are forecasting for next year. It's typical. Last year we had a number of projects that we had anticipated. We have essentially put them on hold because of the not moving forward with the proposed increase last year. So we kind of put the brakes a little bit on some of that work, just so that we knew that, so that we make sure that we have the proper funding to provide those, to move forward with those projects. So we kind of put a pause so we didn't load too many for the next few fiscal year. We are going to be playing catch up on those paused projects, assuming that the rate increase does move forward. Let's see. Debt service, I do want to give kind of just kudos to the finance department. We see a reduction in the debt service payment. This is because of the effort of the finance department to refinance our existing bond. So our payments will be a little less moving forward. So we do see savings on that. With one thing I did want to point out is under the Plan 3 other departments expenditures, there is a significant increase. This is mainly due to the Buena Vista Trunkline project. Moving forward next fiscal year. Should by any chance the recommended rate not go forward, we would reevaluate our anticipated expenditures for next year. So with that, we go into the funding sources. We do anticipate an increase. Again, this is based on the approval of the recommended rate. Should that falter, we would reevaluate at that time. So overall, we do anticipate increased revenue. And we do anticipate increased expenditures, but again, this would be reevaluated should anything other than 475 move forward. Wastewater accomplishments. During the last year, we have completed quite a bit. We've completed the Plant 2 Headworks PLC upgrade project. This was a multi-year effort. It began in fiscal year 24-25, and it replaced the hardware and software components of the logic controllers for the Plant 2 Headworks. This provides operation reliability at the first step of the treatment where wastewater enters the plant. We also completed the aeration air system PLC upgrade. Again, this is the aeration basin is the heart of the biological treatment of the Plant 3. So upgrading that system just provides additional safety and reliability of meeting our plant limits for Plant 3. We also completed the wastewater treatment Plant 2 and Plant 3 evaluations. This was a heavy lift. It analyzed the structural conditions of the infrastructure, the condition of the mechanical and electrical instrumentation equipment, the treatment efficiency, and the treatment capacity for both treatment plants. The results of these evaluations were used to establish the 10-year CIP plan, along with the corresponding project costs that all of that information was then utilized to finalize our recommended rates, 2026-2030 sewer rates and fees report, which this council has been presented prior to that. So a lot of heavy lift went into that Plan 2, Plan 3 evaluations, really to set us up for future planning. Lastly, for our personnel overview, we are requesting a total of 9 new positions for the department, as well as reclassification for our fiscal administrative services officer from an officer 2 to an officer 3. This request is being made in line with just the fiscal efforts for our department, especially with the rates increasing and the projected expenditures moving forward. The personnel requests for Plan 2 and Plan 3, the operators, as I had mentioned, this is just an ongoing effort to properly staff the both treatment plants, which have been understaffed for many years. So this is just an effort to realign with industry standards. The water inspector, we kind of went through some of our past project and costs for inspecting services, and we identified about $1 million of costs associated with inspection services in the past 2 fiscal years. So in an effort to try and reduce that cost, we are requesting a water inspector for our projects. And lastly, the hydrographer, that one is required just due to increased monitoring need in the river and local, state, and federal requirements for that one. So with that, we will open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roldan. Mr. Maldonado, would you be able to comment on the implications of the golden mussel? I know at the Water Summit, the biologists painted a very daunting picture, didn't seem to have a lot of solutions. I saw recently that Congressman Fong allocated some funding for this, but just talk about the funding implications and any other implications.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, Vince Fong actually allocated $5 million for the effort for the San Joaquin Valley area. Golden mussels is becoming an issue in Kern County. However, the Kern River system is still free of mussels, including upwards into Lake Isabella, where we source the water from. We're expanding our efforts to do outreach to local boating communities and residents in the area that are recreating with vessels. However, we're trying to take that proactive approach. There are agencies that have been affected by golden mussels around us, and they've found some chemical alternatives to address that and mitigate some of those issues. At this time, we're not experiencing that yet. However, we're still planning and learning from those that are going through the remediation effort.
The biologists seem to indicate that the multiplication is extremely rapid, and so the rate of it traveling into our system could be worrisome, or are you feeling like at this point we're not overly concerned?
We're not overly concerned. However, there is a concern. Like you mentioned, each golden mussel can produce about 1 million, seedlings that can create into golden mussels. They'll grow into golden mussels, and so there is a growing concern. We're still, like I mentioned, we're working on an outreach program with a number of water agencies in the area to try to get that outreach out, because as I mentioned before, it hasn't been monitored in Lake Isabella, which is a source of the Kern River supply, or in our Kern River system. And so we're hoping to maintain that, being mussel-free in the Kern, and so we'll keep a close eye to the situation.
Thank you. Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you both for the presentation. As you can imagine, I have questions related to wastewater. And so as we've gotten additional feedback from the community, there have been a number of stakeholders and members of the public who have recommended that we look into opportunities to identify grants to help address the CIP costs for Plant 3 and Plant 2. Can you speak to that and speak to the availability of those grants for a city of our size?
Yes, so I'll have to do it in general terms, but in general, yes, there are grant opportunities. However, typically, you really can't apply for those opportunities until you have 100% design. So for a lot of our more costly projects, we are about, I don't know, about 5 years away from 100% design, so we really can't predict or plan on, it wouldn't be fiscally responsible for us to plan on money we have not yet secured. So at that time, once we do have 100% design, once we have full knowledge of what grants we are eligible, 5 years from now, what's available 5 years from now, we would definitely go ahead and go through that process, and any grant money that we received at that point would definitely offset our cost in-house.
Can you speak to the scale of those grant opportunities that are available today? Because, we were over the moon when the governor came down and said that, 22 million for TCC was going to come to the city of Bakersfield.
Yeah.
But 22 million in the context of our wastewater upgrades that are needed is a drop in the bucket.
Yes, I can't really speak specifically. However, I have never seen such large funding amounts made available to municipalities. I would say they're probably in the range of 5 to 10 million. The only exception I've seen recently had to do with a international treatment plant. So one down south. It affected Mexico, TJ specifically, and San Diego County. That one had, but international brought in a lot more attention and a lot more interest from Washington, D.C., and that's why it had additional funding. So anything that would be more applicable to us and, sort of a fairer comparison would be much smaller.
Got it.
Yeah, just a few things to add there, Councilmember, and Yvette covered the scale accurately. Typically, these are actually even revolving loan funds. Often they're not actually straight grants. There are some grants, but at the state and federal level, they typically try to address utilities through revolving loan funds that have very favorable rates, and that can be helpful. But typically, it is in that $5 or $10 million range. The largest ones we've seen is about $20 million. And to your point, when we think about a $1.2 billion, 15-year, CIP plan, or a $500 million plant, we'll take all the help we can get. Don't get us wrong. Like we're gonna apply. We're gonna seek efficiencies in our designs. We're going to seek public-private partnerships as referred by council to identify if there's any, potential revenue sources as part of the design, and we will seek out grants. But I think realistically, those funding sources are not going to be the primary way of addressing the challenge. And then my last thought for council to consider is that, we really looked at these first 5 years of rates of the really important reset. If we were able to, determine a different phasing or a large, even within that scale that we talked about, but on the larger end of a revolving loan fund or grant, it might help us have the ability to not need to, let's say, do year 6 or year 7 of the rate increase. But I don't think it's going to keep us from needing to get to a much more sustainable rate in this first 5-year set of rates.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions on the hydrographer as a new position. I thought the water department had a hydrographer.
Councilmember Smith, hi. Currently, we have a hydrographer hired within the complement. We've had an overfilling of a hydrographer of a lower position due to the need to, as Mr. Rodon emphasized, the need to measure more frequently, complying with state regulations for real-time data submittals. And so we had that need now, and so we went ahead and overfilled that position. So this request that we're making is just to create that hydrographer position, and that lower position will be filled for their respective duties.
And on the water inspector, is that actually doing the testing that we've been contracting out, or what exactly is that?
Yeah, we envision this position to reduce a lot of the construction management. We do have some significant projects, as we've touched on, that would probably require a construction management, someone that specializes in that. However, we have a lot of smaller projects for both water resources and wastewater that the construction inspector can begin to utilize. We're envisioning them working on projects in the $1 to $5 million range that don't have as much issues that are pretty much straightforward. That way we can have that reduction. And so that's kind of how we envision that position beginning and then eventually evolving as they become more experienced.
And if I may, Councilmember Smith, Daniel, could you also speak to the analysis we conducted as to the cost savings versus contract versus internal, and with the retainers, why we feel like in some instances it can be more beneficial to have someone on retainer, but in many instances with the sort of the economies of scale that will create that there's a savings there. Could you walk through that as well?
Yeah. So some of our CIP projects, we have a few. We have a Basin 13 reconstruction project. It's about a $300,000 project. We anticipate about a 10% of the construction cost to be CM related, and so we have that project. We have about $1 million to $2 million of projects this fiscal year that we think that the construction inspector can take on and perform those services. The construction inspector, I believe the cost for that position is about $130,000. If you're looking at, if it's $2 million at a 10% of CM costs, that'll be a savings that the department will see, significant savings in the immediate future.
Got it. Thank you. And just back to the golden mussels, the key is to keep our separate system from where the mussel may come from, which is state water, basically.
Yes, it's been observed in state water and also federal water. And so at this time, we haven't introduced any golden mussels since we've really learned about golden mussel infested water into the Kern River system since we've learned about the issue. And so we're trying to do our best to keep it that way as long as we can, making sure that we've gone through a lot of operational. We changed our operations a little bit just to make sure that we avoid any type of risk right now. And so we're doing our part as best as we can to avoid that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maldonado, Mr. Roldan. I don't see any other requests, so we appreciate your sharing. And now on to general fund review.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. Mr. McKeegan will walk you through what will be, I think, your first look at the final numbers for general fund. We gave you estimated numbers, more than a month ago. But we wanted to take this opportunity in this setting to clarify those general fund numbers and provide some just sort of overarching summary information that I think is valuable going into your June public hearing and deliberation on the budget, and then we'll go into the CIP projects.
Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, council members. You can see me over here. Appreciate what presentations we've just heard today. As you probably know now, that was the last presentation Water presented you, the last budget presentation they've given. So you've seen all the department requests for this coming fiscal year, both operational and CIP requests, and obviously funded both by the general fund and other sources, enterprise fund operations, capital improvement projects, special revenue grant funds, and obviously enterprise dollars. So as we go through this, I'm going to really focus on the general fund specifically, because that is, as we've talked about before, the primary source of funds for discretionary dollars. So I'm going to walk through that, starting, of course, with a familiar slide to you. If you recall, back in the special meeting we had in March 19th, I believe it was, we presented our proposed budget for the general fund and our estimated revenue for the general fund for the upcoming fiscal year. So this provides that same estimate, or that same analysis, so to speak. You look at the current actual revenue, the estimates for this year, and obviously the budget for next year. You will note, though, if you recall the presentation, if you were able to, from the March 19th, or if you actually went to those 6 presentations we made at the different wards, we had a budget of about $438 million budgeted or estimated. As we move forward, we've received updated numbers. We're closer to $440 million because of 4 main areas. We touched on in one of those already, the short-term rental funds. We are anticipating additional dollars from TOT if we are able to initiate that mid-year, about $500,000. We actually got new reports from our sales tax consultant, increasing our sales tax numbers by about $800,000. In addition to that, we also relooked at some of our property tax numbers, specifically dollars related to the VLF backfill. and that added additional $400,000. So that it added, again, about $2 million of revenue estimates for the upcoming fiscal year. In addition to that, I did want to highlight an item under the transfer in item. We talked about a standard amount of money coming in. It's been mentioned, the general fund subsidy from the PSVS of about $12 million. Based on our analysis, our cost reductions, and additional revenues, we've been able to reduce the transfer in from the PSVS to general fund by $500,000. So this year, the proposed budget for PSVS transfers is $11.5 million as opposed to 12. So moving forward, here's the graphical representation of that general fund dollars at $444 million, and nothing really has changed. Obviously, with the major sources of revenue, over close to 3/4 of our revenue comes from sales tax or property tax, from tax revenue, and that metric hasn't really changed even with the additional $2 million that we touched on earlier. So now we're moving into the proposed expenditures, and what this shows is our final numbers, our proposed budget for, our final budget, I should say, for this year, are proposed for next year. The change in that estimate, and obviously what you see in the last column is the percentage of each department of the total general fund in that top section. So you'll see the majority of our costs for the general fund go to public safety, 62%, split between 45 to PD and 16 or close to 17 to fire. One of the things I did want to note in addition to that is that change number. You'll note that the largest change is in the city manager and in the development services departments, and we touched on that in these presentations. The economic development department did get absorbed primarily to the development services, but also a portion of them did go under the city manager. So those numbers, those increases of 29% from the prior year and 52.6% from the prior year are, in a good portion of that is that shift. As you see, the economic development is 100% reduced because of that absorption into those two departments. At the bottom section, you'll note the general fund breakdown by function, and has been touched on previously. The majority of the general fund costs go towards personnel costs, which not only is salaries, but it's the benefits, pension costs, workers' comp costs, the cost of medical benefits, those types of things. So you'll see that when we look at, and just so you understand that, when we look at reductions in general fund, the majority of those costs, based on the majority of the costs coming out of personnel, have to come out of personnel when we look at reductions, and we'll touch on those later. What I did also, I wanted to present the PSVS only. We had the committee chair, Nick Ortiz, come and also talk about the PSVS. So I did want to break down the PSVS dollars specifically and how it breaks down. So it's giving that same analysis of current year to current year to next year, the change from current year to next year, and obviously the breakdown by department. The largest, again, is police, public safety, goes in that specific department. The next largest, specifically from PSVS, is development services at 16.6%. Again, those increases between the departments in city manager department and the development services increases, those are again related to that absorption of the economic and community development. You also note that that reduction of $500,000 in transfers is noted there in that 2.5% reduction from transfers from PSVS. What we did want to do is also, this is based on the discussion both at the committee level and at council, to kind of walk through the public safety costs that are paid for by PSVS. So when we look at this, and this analysis was done with including homeless services in public safety. That's our approach to classifying public safety as including dealing with homeless services. So when you take into account the 51% from police and fire, when you take into account the CMO's Office of Violence Prevention costs, when you take into account the rangers, when you look at the code enforcement costs, rapid response team, when you look at the operations of BLNC, and obviously the CIP costs, close to 70% of the PSVS fund is budget goes towards what we would classify as public safety. In addition to that, what we did is also take into account that $11.5 million that's being transferred over to the general fund. The previous slide showed 62% of general fund dollars is public safety. So if you take 62% of that transfer, it's not necessarily a perfect metric, but if you took 62% of the transfer in addition to all these other costs I've just delineated, close to 76% of the PSVS dollars is budgeted towards public safety. So moving from that, I wanted to we talked about this in the March meeting. When we went through the March meeting, we talked about the potential need and the need to balance the budget in the general fund, which would require reductions in the general fund budget. So what we've done here is laid out those reductions. We talked about those. We gave more specifics to that in the March meeting, but this really shows the results of those reductions. We reduced 73 vacant positions from the general fund, and that breakdown is here. The largest reductions were in police, fire, and public works, both in dollar amounts and number of positions, resulting in $9.5 million in reductions in personnel costs in the general fund. In addition to that, we had other cost reductions that we initiated. That first one is really just a one-for-one. We've stopped providing county services for graffiti remediation. That had an offsetting revenue to that, but that was a reduction in expenditures. In addition to that, we've had some updated actuarial reports from our OPEB actuarial. In addition to that, it was well over $2 million. So we had some updates. We actually had some updates on the overall program. We've reduced that to about $800,000. So that's a $1.3 million reduction in OPEB contributions. That's our retiree medical benefit. We also had some reductions in police department outside services. So they initiated some efficiencies related to body-worn cameras. In addition to that, they reduced some costs related to third-party security and the ShotSpotter program, resulting in a $1.7 million reduction. There are also reductions in community development contributions to outside agencies, resulting in primarily in PSVS, but that resulted in a $1.3 million reduction. And then after that, I talked about the $500,000 reduction in transfers. That resulted, but in addition to that, we had some debt, specifically loans related to energy efficiency. Those were 5-year loans. That reduced the need to pay for that debt service by another $300,000. So all of these taken together, we had close to $17 million in reductions initiated to balance the budget. Moving forward then, now we will ask City Manager Clegg to talk through the project review of the CIP. Unless you have any questions. I'm actually open to questions, sorry.
I'll just, Mayor and Council, one just quick thought, and Randy, help me on the numbers. But it just hit me as we were looking at that reductions slide that we just looked at, that our 5% reduction in personnel costs, our target in our multi-year reduction strategy was a 5% reduction, which was just over $12 million. And so if you saw from that list, it's important to note that on the personnel side, it was even hard to get to the full 12 million just on personnel, but we had identified other operating savings in several of the departments that helped reach that 5% target. But then combining those other measures plus our personnel and operating reductions, that we were beyond the 5%. We reduced more than the 5%, which was important, but also we continue to see our costs increase. And as you saw in March as well, our increase in revenues was about $9 million, but our increase in costs was about $23 million. And so we are making the important changes that we need to make, but I have to underscore that we have to make them because that's just the reality of those cost increases through inflation continuing to occur, and we've got to get to a place where we're structurally sound. But we accomplished our goal and then some for this first year of making those changes. So this last portion is, again, just to highlight the CIP. And in some prior budget years, for some council members, although Councilmember Bashir-Tash, this is second budget cycle, and it's similar to the process this year is similar to last year, but some council members remember where we've had a time where we just brought forward a CIP in total, and there weren't optional, decisions necessarily of the council, that those had been, sort of vetted out in advance. But the reason to tee this up is that, for your June budget adoption, there are choices to be made about what CIP projects do move forward and what projects don't move forward. So again, this is a long list, but we wanted to at least include this in total. In our capital outlay fund, which, as noted earlier, comes from our transient occupancy tax transfer into the capital outlay fund, we have about $6 million available for capital projects. What we did as staff is we went through that list of what I would consider important projects that would lead to further deferred maintenance or further, increase in costs if we waited too long, or some of our ongoing CIP items. For example, every year we have a certain number of, vehicles that, crash into some of our traffic street lights, and we have to go and make those repairs, or that we have ADA work that we get complaints and it's pointed out to us, we've got a broken sidewalk, we need to go fix it. Some of these are just regular, ongoing, every year needs, as well as some of those more deferred maintenance needs. And so this first list is, as staff, we're recommending and saying these are important projects that really can't wait, or have been mandated for some reason. Whereas on this next list, this next list also represents from the PSVS side that these are similar projects that we think either are really important for maintaining our fire stations, police station, and in the example of the 2 park items, we would identify those as high priorities as city staff. One, the park amenities and renovation improvements gives our staff the ability to do really important projects throughout the year that aren't necessarily identifiable going into the year. And that's we had $1 million in past years. Last year we reduced it, and we're recommending to keep it at this reduced level of $500,000. And then for the reasons I've already shared with your council around MLK Park and the grant match and trying to complete that first phase and keep the $11.9 million grant that we've received, I consider that a priority to not put that funding at risk. So those are the 2 lists of projects we're saying absolutely should go forward. On the PSVS side, we have closer, Randy, maybe $7.2 million that's available for one-time funding projects. And so I'll go back one slide, we have $4.3 million in projects we're recommending for a little over $6 million in funding, and $4.6 million for $7.2 million in funding. That leaves some balance in both of those one-time accounts. Before I click even to the next slide, it is an option for your council to say, let's go ahead and put some of that money into the Section 115, as recently discussed. It's another opportunity to say, let's put a little more aside for example, the initiative of the council around addressing accountability in the criminal justice system with access to jail beds. We have $1.9 million set aside for the jail beds project from a prior year that we've carried forward. 1.9 is a very good start. It may not be, I should say it wouldn't be enough, I think, to do the entire scope that's being imagined right now. And so we are pursuing other funding sources and funding partners, but your council could set aside more dollars for the jail bed task force, or you could pick some additional capital projects, or you could put it into contingency, capital reserve, or the Section 115 loan. Those are all, I would argue, good recommendations to set those funds aside. Now, shifting to these next 2 slides, these are projects that were proposed either by departments noting some opportunities and needs, or by even council members saying, here's an idea or a referral to be considered. You'll note that there's $3.8 million of general fund there, but you really only have about $2 million, to work with. And if you, again, you put some of that $2 million into contingency or reserves, that's probably even less here. So this is where these will be items for council to consider in picking and choosing, along with also the potential again of just putting it into reserves or contingency on the capital outlay side. So let me speak a little bit to each of these projects. The rectangular rapid flashing beacons, that's part of traffic calming efforts to be able to post those on city streets that would make folks aware of their speeds to help with traffic calming. Our block wall repairs, that's been a topic for the last several years, that we know we have aging block walls that we are responsible for, and we've mostly been doing them on a break-fix approach. And that break-fix approach has cost us anywhere from about $100,000 to $200,000 a year. We could continue in a similar fashion, but if we wanted to start getting ahead or setting aside more for some of the bigger break fixes that are probably coming in coming years, this could be a potential allocation there. Panama Lane is a pedestrian improvement request that came out of multimodal to create more of a safety distinction for some pedestrian areas along Panama Lane. As your council has noted, an increase in our tree planting and urban canopy. There's a potential to put dollars towards tree planting. Spay and neuter services, it's important to note that we already have about $250,000 in the operating budget for spay neuter. We added an extra $100,000 2 years ago, and that helped us to catch up on some of this high volume spay neuter. We didn't include it in last year's budget, but of course there was an offer to match and that conversation around that. And so we did then allocate out of contingency funds additional dollars for spay neuter. And so we put this as a consideration for council whether or not to continue to have an extra amount for spay neuter, but there is spay neuter already in the budget. Sewer assistance fund, just a placeholder for consideration. We've had CDBG sidewalk and curb cut improvements made throughout an area of Old Town Kern, close to Old Town Kern, north of the greater downtown area. And we're continuing with those projects, but they'll take many years to implement. If we move forward with a bigger chunk of those all at once, that's what's represented by that $1.2 million there at QNSB. We did have a couple of other fire station projects that we think have value, but could potentially, push maybe 1 year by comparison to some of the other ones, but do have value there as well. And then shifting gears over to the PSVS side, again, now these are larger dollars in the big scope. You've got about $3 million, a little less than $3 million to work with in PSVS additional one-time funds. But your budget, it's important to note, does not assume already more streetlights, but we've done about $1 million in streetlights every year. We also have the Beach Park Bridge that would be the next phase, as discussed earlier by Mr. Meyer. We've allocated each year over the last a couple of years some grant match funds or traffic calming improvements. So that's an option here. We have several park projects that would be the next in our replacement life cycle. And that's Centennial and Westwold. And we also have Seaman Park tennis courts down below. I think it's worth noting that we had some significant park catch-up over the last 5-6 years. And these are now the parks that would be at sort of the end of their useful life and do need to see some improvement at some point. Could they push? Yes, I think they could push a year or two, but these would be the next in our life cycle replacements. And I would also note that we had we had 2 parks that had been long awaited in the replacement cycle that had been contingent projects over the years, and we've addressed those for the most part. And so we do have a little bit of potential wait time on these. And then we also continue to have, we've been putting security cameras up in parks, but we knew with 62 parks, it would take many years to phase security cameras into all of the parks. And so this $250,000 would represent another phase of that. But again, that's something I would argue doesn't have necessarily the same return on investment as some of the deferred maintenance that would save us other cost dollars. And then park access improvements, that's also some of that is parking lots as well as internal roads in parks that help give better access to employees as well as guests. And then the last item there, as noted also earlier in the conversation, was that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, currently the balanced budget, and again, it wouldn't imbalance the budget, but the capital outlay assumptions don't already include an allocation to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It would be one of those optional items for council to say, yes, we want to include that in the budget. So those are all the 4 slides on this topic. I'm not looking for council vote today, but if there is some questions about these items and even some council dialogue that would inform staff items that we prepare for the June 10th public hearing to consider the budget, including what is in the CIP.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Can you again just clarify how much flexibility council really has beyond the ones you have indicated as can't wait? So you have that 4.3 and you said we can't wait on that. And then you also mentioned some costs such as the block wall repairs that occur every year. So unless we're,
Thank
is
you.
that amount in addition? But if you just could really clarify what there is for council to really consider that goes beyond the ones that can't wait.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We can for our next session and could have potentially at least put the dollar figure that's the clarity. But again, for capital outlay, it's about $2 million, and for PSVS, it's a little less than $3 million. That again, we're recommending council has to work with. Now, I will say the entire list, even though we've recommended those items, it's still subject to council determination. The full, $7 million and $6 million. But if you went forward with staff's recommendation on those 2 lists that we think are things that are not wise to wait on, you've got $2 million on the general fund, about $3 million on the PSVS side. But you've got, again, on the general fund, you've got $3.8 million in potential projects, and that doesn't even include, again, just putting the money in contingency or other reserves as an option. And then on the PSVS side, you've got about $3 million to work with, and you've got $6.3 million in potential projects. So you can pick about.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Clegg, and thank you to your team for, number one, listening to the community throughout the year and some of the needs that have been raised and concerns that have been addressed, or at least lifted up to be addressed, and reflecting that in this capital outlay budget. I really want to focus in on slides 10 and slide 11, which are the additional options here. With the revenue or with the available dollars from the general fund, the $2 million from the general fund and $3 million from PSVS, when we adopt our budget, we are not required to spend those dollars. We can place those into contingency to make a decision as to how to best spend those dollars in the future with this optional list.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm going to voice my preference, and that is to put all of these dollars into contingency to at least give us a better sense of where we are financially and where the state of the economy is in the next 3 to 4 months, and perhaps return this question back to the council after the first quarter of the new fiscal year, which would be November Yeah, so maybe when do we get our sales tax reports? So we get them quarterly, correct?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. The sales tax numbers come in quarterly, but they have about a 45-day delay. So the first quarter ending September 30th, we'll get it, as you said, in November. We would have the reports mid-November.
I think given the conversation we had with Mr. Ortiz and what we've heard from the PSVS Oversight Committee and their call for us to practice some restraint financially and to heed the warning of potential concerns, I think it's important for us to respect that, and I would like us to hold off on spending all of the dollars and putting them aside for that later conversation in November. So I'm interested in hearing from my colleagues, but just from my perspective, that would be a preference of mine. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Bashir Tosh.
I almost had a heart attack hearing you say what I said a year ago and not wanting to agree with me, and now you do. That's weird. I think that PSVS would be beneficial if they made recommendations and brought them to us. That's why they exist. I'd love to see what they said, hey, these are our top priorities we all agree on since they are community oversight, and then we can make a decision based on their expertise being on that committee.
If I may, Councilmember Bashir Tash, I welcome that feedback. Are you saying for the funds that are
for PSVS?
Yeah, for PSVS, but for the entirety of the PSVS or the portion that's beyond the additional portion?
I think it would be wise for both. Absolutely, take the recommendations. They can break it up on their own if they wanted to, but I would love to know what they think about all this before us, since that's their committee.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity because Mr. Ortiz, well, he covered a lot of content there, and I think fostered some good discussion with the committee. Just to be clear, the oversight committee, from the list that we had that's on the screen even right now, had made a recommendation that the park projects not be funded in this current year. They weren't saying that they weren't consistent with the 13 priorities. They were just saying that they wouldn't at this time fund park projects. So the committee did make that recommendation. And that even extends to these two park projects that were here. The PSVS committee did recommend moving forward with the radio site generator project, with the fire turnouts and the fire station improvements. But they recommended not moving forward with the two park items on this slide. And then on this additional option slide, they, again, the only item that they took up specifically was to recommend that, again, we not make the improvements to the parks at this time as a priority. We did not open the floor to say, what would you spend the money on? But do I take from your referral that you would also suggest asking them what they would spend it on, or from a list of potential projects?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, they're a lot of them, from what he said, are business people connected to a ton of constituents, and I believe that they represent quite a bit of people, and I appreciate that, and would love to know what the recommendations are since they've been appointed there. I mean, that's what a democracy is.
Yeah, we can do that. Just want to clarify.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make sure I understood. So your first two, the 4.3 million and the 4.6 million, are recommended and in the budget?
They are recommended, but I would say they're not. When you say in the budget, the operating budget and the capital budgets are separate, and so we do have a balanced operating budget that is ready to come before the council. When we tee up the item on June 10th, we actually haven't prepared that item yet, and so it's not. I wouldn't call these in the budget, but we're recommending they be in the budget.
Correct. And in addition to that, you have the 2 million and 3 million available to also be included.
Correct.
And the block wall repairs, just to, again, so you've got the 100,000 already accounted for somewhere else that you normally spend, and so you're showing an additional to get a little ahead.
That's
instead of
correct.
behind. Okay, basically, I'm in favor of Councilmember Gonzalez's recommendation that, you know, we can sit on it for a quarter and kind of see where we're at, and nothing would probably happen in 3 or 4 months anyway.
Unfortunately, Councilmember, you are correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really grateful to see that the #1 project recommended, or at least the one at the top of the list for the general fund capital outlay project, will prevent staff from having to walk up 5 sets of flights of stairs. And so just really grateful that that's on there. And I know last summer, I believe, it was a nightmare there at City Hall North. So grateful to see
I kind of
that.
like walking up the stairs.
We do call it our wellness program. However, in the possibility of a true emergency, it's very problematic, as well as the maintenance cost has become honestly very prohibitive. This is a good fiscal move, and then future replacement costs or avoidance of risk. It's a good fiscal management move.
Agreed. I don't have any issues or questions related to the recommended projects. I think those are well listed. I think it's a little difficult, at least for me, to apply certain projects to the 3 million versus the 2 million number. But for the total kind of lump sum, I would just express my preference to make sure that we continue to allocate additional funding for the jail bed CIP projects. And I know that we have not made as significant contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in years past. I think what we can do, we should absolutely continue to contribute to ensure that we continue to get that match from the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Over the years, we've had a lot of requests from the public to be engaged in the budget process. And I know this year we had special sessions for them. How many did we have altogether?
We had seven sessions. We had 6 in wards, and we had 1 virtual that was also for the benefit. And thank you, Mayor, for pointing that out. We probably could have and should have highlighted that in our wrap-up summary, that we did significant outreach, and the last one was held here in council chambers. That was also recorded, and it was virtual, so people could, if they weren't able to take time away in an evening, in very, very busy lives, that they could maybe take part of their lunch hour to join our virtual meeting. But then it was also recorded and then posted, and so people can still view it today. And there's a link to a survey that's going to go out that we conducted a survey in all of the town hall meetings, but we're also now going to share that out to the entire community. And we know that the timing will still give us some feedback ahead of our June decisions. But I think we've learned a lot over this spring about ways that the community does engage. And I'll admit that some of those town hall sessions had more people and some had less people. But we do feel like the community surveying has had a lot of interest, and that's going to be a tool that we think will pay even bigger dividends than maybe in-person meetings in the future, although we remain open to those where they make sense. But we look forward to collecting even more feedback next year, and then we're still look forward to sharing the feedback with your council that came from those surveys in the town hall sessions, as well as others who participate in the survey in the next couple weeks before we come to your June 10th public hearing.
Thank you. How many attendees, not including staff, actually were present. I was at one where there were 2, and I think we're 0 in another one. So I'm just curious how many in the public actually chose to engage in the town halls.
Yeah, a majority of the town halls had fairly limited attendance. We had 2 town halls that probably had around 20 people present. But for the most part, they were light attendance, between 2 and 4 individuals in most wards. We had 2 wards that had about 20 individuals.
Approximately how many engaged in the survey?
Pretty much.
Ballparkish.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but probably about 50 individuals from all of the sessions, which again is a good reason to put it out to the broader community. And those 50, may or may not be, statistically representative of the community, but if we can go and get several hundred responses to a community survey on the topic, we think that'll be a much better representation.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests, so we stand oh no, we need a receive and file. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Motion to receive and file.
You have a motion, please cast your votes.
Motion is approved with council members Kaur, Weir, and Coman absent.
Thank you. So we stand adjourned at 2:54.
Thank you.